Hello and welcome back to another episode of How This Indie Dev. Today I'm joined by my guest Jordan from O&Co Games. Jordan and his team are working on a really cool indie game called Tethergeist, which is a beautiful 2D platforming game. Also, you launched a Kickstarter recently to fund the development of the game, which I'll leave as a link in the description below, so you should check it out. And I also saw just today you got fully funded, which is awesome.
We did, yeah.
So congrats on that. Hopefully you'll be able to hit your stretch goals and get your game on consoles as well. I've backed the campaign, and I'm excited to get my hands on the game once it launches. But thanks for coming on to the podcast. How's it going?
It's going great. Thanks for backing us. You're the people's hero.
I was checking it out, and I'm like, man, this game actually looks really cool. I was playing through the demo, and well, we can get into the actual game, but it's really, sure. It's cool. I think you guys are making something special. And we also have very, very distinct approaches between you and I about like how we approach game development, which I want to get into too. But
oh, great, yeah.
But yeah, how's it going?
No doubt about it. Life is good. I don't know where you want me to take that question, but
yep, you can take it however you want. You can say good, and then we will move on. That's perfect.
Yeah, no, it's just been really busy lately. Life is crazy, but good.
For those who are listening and don't know about you or your game Tethergeist, can you kind of give an introduction to who you are and what you're up to?
So Tethergeist is the game my team of 3 is working on. We're a small studio called O&Co Games. O is the first letter of my last name, so it's O and Company.
Nice.
But it's me, Noah, and Ray. I'm the developer who writes all the code, does the level design. I've been very heavy in marketing as well. And then the soundtrack is also me. And then Noah and Ray are a power couple. They're married, and they do the artwork, the storyboarding, the narrative design, and of course all the marketing and stuff comes from them as well. So the 3 of us have been working on this game for 3 years. Tethergeist is a precision platformer akin to the likes of Celeste and Ori. We recently showcased it at PAX West, and if I had a nickel for like every time somebody said Celeste at our booth, I think I could have paid for the whole trip, just because of how commonly it was referenced. But the fun thing is that whenever people play the game, they're able to figure out pretty quickly that while we take inspiration from Celeste, we are by no means a clone or any sort of copy, because the movement systems are quite different. The similarities, though, are that it is high difficulty. It has forgiving checkpoint systems, and it has a heartfelt story that comes from the team directly, some of our personal experiences. But yeah, it's live on Steam. We have a demo there right now. It takes people between 1 to 3 hours to complete the demo, so it's a pretty lofty demo that hopefully gives people like a good feel for what they're getting into. And we've gotten just like tons of great praise along the way. We playtest it all the time, and we've honestly put it in front of thousands of people at this point, and we've kind of like refined the design over and over again through that playtesting process to get to where we are. And we're really excited about it. We hope we're onto something special. We feel like we are, because we don't like to push something to market without having tested it over and over again. Yeah. And anyway, that's kind of my 2 cents on what to expect from Tethergeist, precision pixel platformer.
Yeah, that's awesome. I played the demo, and it was really fun. You're right, the movement system is very unique. It has a very good mechanical hook. The art is just beautiful, but it is difficult.
Thanks.
I found myself struggling to get through it a little bit, not because of anything like in a frustrating way, but I'm like, oh, this is like clever how you have to get through here, and you have to, the platforming challenges are really fun. So I wanted to talk to you because your game like speaks for itself as a standout platformer, and from watching your devlogs, I think you have a unique perspective on developing games. So I'm excited to chat about that. But I'm also hoping that we can go over like your game development philosophy and approach to designing your game, as well as talk about your personal life and development mix, because I know you're a dad. I'm a dad, actually.
Yeah.
Dad. I don't know if that's backwards on the camera. But
it looks right to me.
This is my dad mug. Yeah.
I love it. It's official.
Exactly. You're a dad. I'm a dad. And that poses unique challenges for people who are trying to develop games, especially for people who are holding down a full-time job and working on their game, mornings, evenings, and weekends. So I think we have a lot of good stuff to chat about.
Yeah, absolutely.
So first, let's jump into like game development and strategy. You kind of gave us the elevator pitch for your game. You said that it's been compared to Celeste. In what ways has that is that always a key reference point that you point people to as an inspiration for your game? Because I imagine you see people making that comparison a lot.
Yeah, it's the easiest comparison to make, and so we do make it commonly, like I just did in my elevator pitch, but we also do so with a little bit of trepidation, because we don't want to be seen as shovelware. We don't want to be seen as a copycat, because we've done so much that's unique to Tethergeist. So Celeste is one of the ones we point for inspiration, but we also readily point at Hyper Light Drifter as one of our inspirations as well, even though the gameplay is remarkably different, right? Hyper Light Drifter is kind of the top-down view. Graphically, we take a ton of inspiration from that. Noah, one of the pixel artists on my team, he has a Hyper Light Drifter book on his desk that he'll oftentimes be thumbing through just for like inspiration for different color schemes or different ways to kind of portray certain elements in the game. So
Cool.
We point people to that one a lot. And then story-wise and visually, like with our high resolution images, we point to Ghibli. Not that we're necessarily an anime studio, but we take a lot of inspiration from the way that Miyazaki has portrayed emotion in his characters and how he takes time to not only show like facial expressions, but to put some emotion behind that so you can kind of see where they're coming from. So those are kind of like our big pillars, right? We say Celeste for gameplay, Hyper Light Drifter for visuals, and Ghibli for storytelling.
Nice. That is a lethal combination.
We're nerds for all of those things, so hopefully it resonates with other people too. But
that's awesome. So I'm interested because I've been watching your devlogs, and I find it fascinating how you are iterating on like the tight controls that a good platformer needs. So in your experience and in your preference, what do you think makes a good platformer?
That's a great question. Is it fun? Boring, easy way to say it.
That's a great answer.
But for us, we have design pillars specific to our platformer. So what makes our platformer a good platform, maybe this is cheating and I'm kind of answering the question I want to answer, but is the the difficulty curve needs to be hard but forgiving. So that's kind of like our first pillar is you want the game to never elicit feelings of like inadequacy in the player, if that makes sense. I don't want players to sit down and get to a room and look at it and say, oh, this is impossible, and they put the controller down. We want it to always feel achievable, but then we want to kind of punish the player as much as we can to make it difficult so that it's all the more satisfying when they get to the end of it. So challenging but fair would be one of the first things. And that fair aspect is something that you've probably seen in some of my devlogs. Like, how do you make a game feel fair? There's, the time-old design principle of like coyote time and input buffering and having predictable physics, making sure the character doesn't run too fast or too slow, acceleration, deceleration, right? There's all that like fine-tuning and tweaking to get the physics right, but all of that operates underneath that design pillar of fairness, making the player feel predictable and easy to control. So that'd be the first point that makes a good platformer. The second one to me is, and this one might be more opinion than anything. I don't know that I'd prescribe this in every other game, but the artwork needs to feel immersive. So we care a lot about micro animations and making, this tiny little 32 pixel sprite look as lively as it can. And then in tandem with that is a compelling story. And that one's really opinion based because there are some fantastic platformers with virtually no story. I mean, Saving Princess Peach is exciting, but ultimately that's not a very deep emotional story, and yet it's the greatest platformer of all time. So that's for me what makes a great platformer, I think, and being intentional about it. I think that too often platformers get shipped without really ever playtesting and without ever really making sure that it's going to be compelling, and it's made for a very saturated market in this genre. It's not a genre I would necessarily pick strategically from a marketing standpoint. But.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And I definitely felt that when I was playing through the demo of that feeling of being forgiving but also challenging, because I was there were frequent enough checkpoints to where I never hesitated to just jump off of a ledge and just throw myself at a room, you know. And so I didn't feel like I was risking like losing progress that much. I just felt like, oh, this looks like a new challenge, you know. I'm excited to see if I can make these jumps, you know. And so I thought that was for what it's worth, I think that it's a good balance.
Well, and that one's XOK Games for sure. We took that from them.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons Celeste resonated with me so much is precisely what you said. Like,
yeah.
So you never feel punished. Yeah,
totally. I'm interested. You obviously, if you're well versed in some of the top indie platformers, but how much market research has gone into creating this game? Like, are you somebody who plays a lot of games? Do you take notes while playing games, or like how did you construct sort of like how you wanted to create this unique, gorgeous platformer, but also be different than other platformers? Do you play a lot of games?
I play way too many. I feel like I've been through the full gambit of analyzing games so deeply that I hate playing games. And like descending into that valley of, okay, now I can't even enjoy these because I'm constantly analyzing the design, to then like ascending on the other side. Not that I'm like enlightened or anything, but like to hitting a point where I can appreciate just about every good element of a game while noting the parts that I don't like, but being able to sift through those and take the parts that I do like and take those as inspiration. Yeah. So yeah, like I'll give you an example. I don't know if you've played the game Garlic. It's bombastic. The story is a little crass, but the gameplay it's very much a Celeste. Like he even has a dash. There's different ways you can climb walls and stuff. And I've been playing that one recently for research as well as enjoyment. And it's a precision platformer. It's, I think, intentionally designed to be a bit of a rage game. And while playing through this type of game, I'm able to look at like the camera system and feel nauseated by it because I really don't like the camera system of Garlic. But then within that same kind of thought process, really admire the way that it explores the movement systems and the way that it juices up the game with the right types of animations and the way that it's kind of created its own environment. So that's kind of been my personal approach to like market research. Basically any precision platformer that hits the market with any slight degree of interest, I'll play it because it's, I'm hooked on it. Yeah. As far as like macro view of market research, we've done plenty of research to watch how we are choosing the wrong genre. And it's been something that we've wrestled with as a team, because we didn't go into Tethergeist planning to make our first commercial game a precision platformer. We made it in a game jam for GMTK 2021. It scored 10th out of like 6,000 games in that popular vote. Mark didn't showcase it as his 20, but it did make it onto his channel. And that's when we were like, oh, well, maybe we're onto something. So that's the only reason we even got into the precision platformer like genre, as well as just my sincere passion for it. Yeah. But we've looked at the trends and we've looked at how saturated the genre is, and it's really difficult to cut through all the noise. So anyway, I don't know if that fully answers your question.
100%. That's great. Do you take physical notes, or are these like mental checks that you're having in your game, or is it like do you have to really, like the camera in Garlic? Is that something that just stands out to you like a wart, or do you have to like put yourself into developer mode to notice those sorts of things?
No, it stands out immediately. I can't turn it off. And some of that stems from my career as a UX designer. That's what my day job is. The book Design of Everyday Things. Are you familiar with that book? The Design of Everyday Things. Stephen Krug. It's UX scripture, oftentimes described. And he basically opens up the reader's mind into analyzing the design of everything around you. And like I mentioned before, you descend into this pit of like, oh my gosh, everything's so poorly designed. And then eventually can like pull yourself out of being so pretentious and realize, well, I design garbage too, so it's fine. But it's seriously, it's like a way of thinking, to the point where just about every game that I pull out, I'm constantly trying to glean some sort of insight from, things to avoid, things that I really admire, and things that maybe spark ideas that aren't in the game, but put me down the line of thinking. So
nice. That's awesome. What has been like your favorite or the best part about developing Tethergeist?
Watching my kids play it.
That's a good answer.
Funny enough.
Yeah.
Because it's not designed for them, right? Tethergeist is targeting people like me in their 30s or late 20s who grew up playing the SNES and want a challenging platformer, right?
Yep.
But my son, he is 6, my daughter's 4, and Tethergeist is the first video game she ever played, and she can't beat the tutorial section to save her life, but she'll come barge into the office. I've locked the door. But she'll barge into the office and be like, "Can I play Tethergeist?" I'm like, "I don't even know how you're having fun with this because you're just jumping into this." but that's been the most satisfying part, right? And then just branching out, seeing everybody play it and enjoy it, and finding those compliments said behind our backs, which has been really nice to see too. There's a little bit of like, I don't know, narcissism. I'm not narcissism. That's not the right term. But there's a little bit to say about feeling a little bit of external praise and know that it's not just me who thinks that we're onto something good.
Yeah, 100%.
Anyway, yeah.
Yeah,
and then
oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. I was saying the other fulfilling part is the creative side.
Yeah.
Right, generating something that I can just be proud of having made.
Yeah.
Whether or not people like it, I'm a restless creative, and I got to make stuff. So.
Were you making things besides video games before you were making video games, or did you have other creative outlets?
Yeah, I designed a board game with my brother.
Nice.
That one hit Kickstarter and flopped, so it's been fun having a Kickstarter succeed.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
But it was like a secret identity game, and
cool.
Yeah, I've been a musician for a long time, so I've written albums, and
That's awesome. So, yeah, I've actually had a really similar experience with my games where it's been the most rewarding seeing other people play it. Specifically, my nieces and nephew, they came over and played my local party game, Tanks But No Tanks, and one of them said, "This is the best game ever," and I'm like, "It's really not, but thank you," But it's like so fun seeing other people just grab a controller and be able to appreciate the game and have fun with it. It's a pretty cool feeling. I'm interested, what's the most challenging part about developing Tethergeist for you, or like frustrating or difficult?
My go-to answer for that is follow through, but at this point it's not difficult. Follow through was difficult in the past, because there are days that it's no longer fun. And I think everybody who gets into game development maybe has heard that, but never fully believes that it'll happen. Because it's exciting, right? When you're learning a new game engine, when you're participating in game jams, like developing video games never felt like a chore to me in those first 6 months. And even first year, because I did it so rarely. It was like a couple hours a week sometimes. But as of late, now that we're really getting serious as a team, there are days where I sit down and it's like, I just want to play games. I don't want to work on this today. And you have to anyway. And that's kind of evolved a little bit for me to the point where I can still even find satisfaction in a good debugging session where I sit down for 2 hours and literally all I'm doing is debugging these niche use cases that somebody on my Discord found by running the wrong direction. And it's one of those things that has become easier over time, but that was certainly the most difficult thing. And then the other thing that I found to be very difficult for me personally is closing the book when I need to.
Yeah.
I get into a task. I'm like, okay, I'm working on this bug, for example, and I know that tomorrow I'm not going to be in the same mindset, so I got to solve it now. Yeah. And the irony behind that is I'll go to sleep and I'll wake up and I'll solve the bug in like 10 minutes. And I was hitting my head against the desk for like 3 hours until 2 a.m. the night before. So closing the book has been difficult for me too. Like, okay, I just got to leave the game in an imperfect state. Yeah. Come back to it when I'm like fresh. So
yeah, I can relate to that tremendously.
It's good to hear I'm not the only one.
Yeah, no. Especially when I'm trying to like stay up late. I know that there's like a graph, where it's like declining amount of efficacy as it gets later into the night, and I'm like, I know if I go to bed I will I'll be able to fix this tomorrow, but I feel like I'm holding all of these variables in my brain and I don't want to let go of all of it,
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, I'm interested to hear about how you decided that you needed to run a Kickstarter campaign, because selfishly, this podcast series that I'm recording and like talking with other developers stemmed from a conversation that I had with Toby from Squareglade Games and their game Outbound. They had this really gangbusters Kickstarter campaign that made like $250,000 or something like that, and he was talking me through his Kickstarter like philosophy and all of that, and I was thinking like, okay, what is the criteria that indie developers need to like jump on Kickstarter? Who's the right demographic for people who should be seeking development on Kickstarter and all of that? So what was your process leading up to launching this campaign?
Yeah, we had decided over a year ago that we wanted to run a Kickstarter. And Ray recently posted an update, so there's some stuff in that update that I can now share, because I wasn't sure how comfortable the team would be with sharing it. But we had decided to run a Kickstarter. At least in my head, it was initially to provide funding, sure, for the team, but also as a marketing tool for us. Because we're small, we're a tiny studio. I mean, our YouTube channel currently has like 13,000 subscribers, which we're elated about, but we're still a really small fish in the big ocean of indies. And we saw Kickstarter as an opportunity to market our game to a broader audience than we already had, because it gives us an excuse to post a Kickstarter trailer. It puts it in front of people who are perusing Kickstarter through browsing and things like that, and it shows the public that we're serious about completing this thing. So it's not just a devlog series on YouTube where we're kind of like pursuing our dream game and then we disappear after a few months. Like it shows that we're really invested in this. So that was the first reason, right? It wasn't so much for the money for us as much as to communicate to the public that we're genuine and we're going to make this a big deal. Now, with that said, leading up to the Kickstarter and seeing like a couple of our videos on YouTube get up to like 70,000 views, we got stars in our eyes. We're like, well, maybe this could convert. All we need is 1,000 backers, and we'll see enough finances for me to quit my day job. And Noah and Ray they're both artists that run freelance work, and so them being able to like really go full time on Tethergeist is dependent upon the success of the Kickstarter. But it launched a little softer than we had anticipated. And so it's been a really good opportunity for us to, as a team, kind of reevaluate what our actual goals are for this campaign and what we're hoping to get out of it. And so, I'm getting into a different question at this point, but ultimately the thought process was, let's give ourselves enough funding to at least pursue this a lot more seriously, and Noah and Ray to go totally full time on it. If it funded high enough, I would be able to go full time as well. And full transparency, it's not high enough for me to do that yet. And then, of course, the bigger reason was it was a strategic decision to show the public that we're serious about what we're doing, and it's another marketing arm for us. So.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting answer, because I always go back and forth with like, okay, right now, personally, I'm making very small scoped games, and I am kicking around some bigger scoped ideas, and I'm thinking, okay, would I want to make a demo and try and approach a publisher, or would I want to try and approach Kickstarter and see if I can get funding that way? But seeing Kickstarter as a marketing tool makes a lot of sense. But also what I really like about what you said is using it as a tool of gaining trust with your community and people that are following the development, because sometimes that has the inverse effect on Kickstarter, right? Where people collect money and then they disappear. But it's like, but I think it makes a lot of sense where you're like, yeah, we are like this smaller indie team, but this, like, look at what we're making. Like, we want to partner with you as we're developing the game. And I think that just makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, you're right though. It's a weird way to look at it, or it's at least a different way. Yeah,
that's cool. So one thing that I'm really interested though is about your I'm curious about how you conduct play tests, because I've been watching your devlogs, and playtesting is like a really vital part of how you're developing your game. I saw you even took a setup to a local farmer's market, and I thought that was just
Yeah.
such a fun idea. You know, like, come play our game. You get to see like random people come up and just like grab the controller and see how they interact with it. And then there's so much that you've done with like the analytics and data, and like, I don't know, is that influenced from your background in UX design, or like, why is playtesting and like data-driven development so important for your team?
Yeah, it stems a lot from my background in UX. I got a bachelor's in information systems and then a master's degree in user experience. And so it's always been something that's been at the core component as a core component of our design process, just because of that. And so it's probably a little unfair, but I come with an extra bag of skills from just my day job, right? Conducting play tests and evaluating that. And then, like you said, the Steam analytics thing, that's my information systems background. So my whole career has been really strange because I didn't go into user experience right when I graduated with my undergrad. I went into data analytics. I was designing dashboards and connecting to APIs and running SQL and doing all that sort of stuff. And then with that, I found it was a really cool springboard into the career of UX, because most UX designers don't have a background in data analytics. They're usually stemming from graphic design. And so it's differentiated me in my career in that way, right? Because I've been able to come to employers and say, okay, this is cool, but we can also like look at the macro view and analyze millions of rows to figure out what our website conversion rate, all that sort of stuff, right?
Yeah.
So that's one big element, is just it's embedded in me from my career as a UX designer for the past 10 years. And then of course Noah is also a big driving factor for this. So he's always worked in video games. He's even worked on a couple of AAA projects, and he's always has his ear to the ground on processes. And there were definitely moments in our development cycle where I'm like, okay, we could conduct play tests, but I also just kind of want to ship something. And Noah's been like, no, dude, we got to do play testing. And that's when I'm like, okay, well, at the end of the day, that is music to my ears. So let's just sink our teeth into it. And that's been a big element as well. And then truthfully, there's a pivotal moment in our process for Tethergeist when we had already seen it. We rewatched GMTK's video on Valve's playtesting processes and just how rigorous they are. And as a team, we looked at that video and they were like, why are we not doing this? We have this skill set. Like, let's make sure this is part of our process moving forward.
Yeah.
So all of that kind of conglomerated into what is now just ingrained in us. Like, there's no avoiding it, and there's no shipping anything without playtesting now. We can't feel good about it unless we've done that. And there's a ton of other data points too. Noel and Maddie both highly recommend playtesting constantly as well. When we made Tethergeist for GMTK 2021, I jumped on XOK's Discord server and I shared it with them. And Noel messaged back way back then. He, didn't remember me at PAX, of course, because it was just some random dude on Discord.
Yep.
But the first thing he told me was like, "Oh, make sure you're always playtesting." And anyway, so all of those things are just it's kind of the only way to do it in my mind.
Yeah. I think, I mean, it's convicting for me because I don't have a really good process for getting my games into the hands of people very often, but I'm interested when you are looking at somebody play your game in front of you, like live at a farmer's market, or you are looking at data that you've gathered from people, like, what analytics are important to you? What are you paying attention to that make like actionable steps for you to change the game?
Yeah, it depends on your design principles, what type of experience you're aiming for. So for Tethergeist in particular, we care a lot about that fairness thing, like I had mentioned previously. So if anybody is ever showing any signs, whether it be vocalizing it or body language or just a small huff of like, that felt unfair to me, we're writing that down like immediately. And what's funny is you can't always take 100% of your insights and implement all of them, because at the end of the day, every player is different, and what one person feels is fantastic, another person might absolutely hate. So you have to operate within that. There are still going to be people, I mean, I sit here talking about playtesting for fairness, but there will still be people who play Tethergeist who feel it's unfair. We just want that percentage to be very low, and we want it to be almost zero for our target audience, which is precision platformer enthusiasts, right? So when we're conducting playtests, that's one thing we look at a lot. It's just like any sort of potential sign of frustration. The other thing that we do is we make sure to establish an expectation before they even pick up the controller that we're testing the game and not them. And that stems from just UX in general. It's a best practice thing. People have a tendency to feel self-conscious, go figure, if they're being watched. And there's still, I mean, they'll always feel self-conscious. There's really nothing you can do to completely get rid of it. But if you're able to, at the very beginning, really internalize the fact that, or help them internalize the fact that we are testing the game. So if something is confusing, if something didn't play the way you expected, like, that's on us. So tell us all your feedback, be as transparent and vocal as you can. You want to establish that, like, think aloud as much as you can. Good playtesters, people who've playtested lots of games, are already behaving that way anyway. And with that expectation in place, it really helps the playtest be a lot more insightful as well. And then as far as distilling the information goes, right, you have to be able to sift through the good and the bad, because I say this with some hesitancy, but we get feedback that we have to completely ignore because it's one person's opinion, and it's not going to work for the rest of our player base. What we do see, though, is trends start to occur, and so that's one way that we track all of the data. At PAX, for example, it was really common for us to see people complain about the order in which they pick up the nectar for the spirit world. I don't know if you're familiar with that area, but really commonly people would pick up the nectar in the wrong order, and then they would go to play it and then realize that, oh, I've got to pause and retry, and the complaint was always the same, like, I shouldn't be punished for just not knowing that I was supposed to do it in a certain order. And they would word it in many different ways, right? It might be somebody who was really tactful and able to say precisely what I said. Hey, I wish that I could do this differently. Other times it would be a suggestion. People lovingly try to provide solutions before they provide problems. Right? And half the time that's not the solution that actually needs to be implemented. But in their presentation of that solution, you're able to very easily see, okay, they're experiencing the exact same problem that 7 other people just experienced in the last hour. So that's one of the other ways that we kind of distill the findings. But
that's so interesting. I imagine it's a learned skill to be able to watch somebody and then kind of like quantify their body language, how they interact with the game. Like you mentioned, like, any notes of frustration or like a huff, like, do you have a spreadsheet where you say, like, okay, player 137 made a huff when they were at this ledge, or like, do you filter it in your mind and you're like, oh, I think they were frustrated at this? Like, do you just do that naturally?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on how rigorous we want to be with each session. The most radical form of rigor is what you just described, where we'll actually have an observation sheet, like a template worksheet that we fill out, and we have like notes of comments, notes of body language that we perceived during the test, and even like areas for where they experienced those things. But that's honestly not a sustainable way to go about it, especially if you're going to be playtesting with thousands of people. And so more commonly, it's just notes of key takeaway action items from each round. And I'll point out too that when I say thousands of playtests, I'm only testing 5 to 10 people per iteration. So part of the world of UX, Nielsen Norman Group ran a study that shows that you only need 5 to 8 participants in a usability study before the rest of the participants are finding approximately 80 to 90% of the things that are already found. So you really don't need a huge sample size to get the big, heavy-hitting experience issues, right?
Interesting.
So we'll test it with 5 to 10 people, run those kind of quick. Here are the action items. Here's what I'm going to do. Oftentimes an idea will come to mind while a player is doing something, like, they're behaving this way, and I knew if the level is designed XYZ, that behavior would then be rewarded the right way, right? And so I'll write that down. And that ends up, going into the next iteration. And then when we come into the next iteration, we kind of have that stored in the back of our head. Here are the things that we changed. Is it going to resonate the way we think it will? Because sometimes we think that we have a solution. we implement it, and then it didn't actually solve the problem.
Yeah.
And so anyway, we go back and forth through that constant cycle until we arrive to something that is passable, because we can never get perfect, but
yeah, totally,
something that really like achieves as many what am I trying to say, the highest percentage of players achieve that experience that we're aiming for. So
do you ever run into an issue where somebody has a problem or a frustration, or maybe many people have a common complaint about Tethergeist, but you have like a philosophical contrary opinion to them, where like you think the players are wrong because of your artistic vision?
This is a tender chord, because this is where our team dynamics come into play, and I think it's a good thing. It makes us a stronger team for it, but it's rare that ever happens with me. It's usually Noah that takes issue. Because he has a creative vision. He has a specific view of what immersion should be in Tethergeist, and he has a view and opinion of what is cringy and world breaking.
Yeah.
And so I'm not an artist like he is. I'm not as in tune. So sometimes I'll be like, oh, the solution's easy. Let's place a nectar this way, or let's do a platform like such. And he'll see that and be like, dude, that's the ugliest thing I've ever seen. And then we have to make a compromise, right? We'll have a discussion as a team, and we'll figure out a solution that way. And there's compromises from both ends. Noah will sometimes have to yield and say, okay, you're right. There are too many people complaining about this thing. Let's sacrifice some of the artistic vision for playability. Or vice versa. I'll say, you know what, the playability isn't really that strongly impacted either way. Let's run with the part that's more immersive. And that doesn't always, 90 to 95% of the time they're both aligned, but there is the occasional moment where that happens. I'm trying to think if I have any examples. I'll give you one. The town, from day one, we have received feedback that people cannot fully know where the platforms are walkable. So in the town, from day one, people watching the videos would say, oh, well, I don't know what I can stand on and what I can't. And so we redesigned it with like blue awnings, and the feedback was still there. It never went away. They're like, well, I'm not sure where I can land. And then we redesigned it with really strong red awnings, and people are still saying that. Well, I'm not sure where I can walk. And it's hit a point where Noah's like, we have a very intentional world built here, like inspired by Mesoamerica and Tatooine, and there's this beautiful like village that we've built, and at the end of the day, they're going to figure it out. Yeah, they might fall through a couple of platforms, but they'll figure it out. They'll forgive us because it looks gorgeous. And so, yeah, that's kind of where we've arrived at the town. I think we're done. Trying to fix that, because at the end of the day, everybody who does explore the town, they find it as a low-hanging complaint. That's one of the things that we've kind of coined a term as a team, is there are low-hanging complaints where people want to provide feedback because they want to be part of the design process, and we're grateful for that continual feedback. But at the end of the day, they're not upset by it. They just want to be helpful.
Totally.
And so some of those low-hanging complaints we just have to kind of move on from, because we've only got so much, many hours.
Totally. Yeah. And for like the town issue that you described, it's funny because like if you take that to its fullest extent, you come across the controversial issue of like the yellow paint that's splattered across the ladder. I don't know if you've seen that online, where people are so upset that the designers of, I forgot what game it was, but they just like splattered like yellow paint just to like lead the player, and they're like, we didn't need this, it's like it breaks the immersion, all this stuff. Yeah, it's the same thing.
You try to provide a solution and you swing too far the other direction and upset players. Yeah. Well, and I should point that out. That is something that we have been very intentional about, is we don't want to ever make the player feel like we're holding their hand in a condescending way. So yes, we're designing it to be fair, and yes, we're going through playtesting, but we also have a certain expectation of the player that they're going to be competent and good at gaming. And I think there's an interesting balance you have to strike there, so that when players get to the end of an obstacle, they feel like they've really accomplished something, because we've given them a genuine challenge that we expected them to have to rise to the occasion to beat, while also providing them with the right tools and equipping them with the right knowledge up until that point.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Shifting gears a little bit, I'm interested about your YouTube channel and how making YouTube videos has influenced the development of your game.
Yeah, that was really kind of a magical moment when we started it. I had opened up O & Co. YouTube, I want to say a year before our first devlog, and I had posted like a how to win a game jam strategy video that did terrible. I think it got like less than 100 views. And then we posted devlog 0 because we, keeping our ear to the ground, we were seeing all these other indie devs post devlogs and grow an audience with them. So we're like, well, it can't hurt to try. See what happens. And the first devlog for us was a huge deal. I mean, within the first, I want to say 4 days, we had 2,000 subscribers on our channel, and the video had like accrued 18,000 views or something. And I mean, I had designed a board game before. I had a band in college. None of my creative projects were ever successful by any stretch of the imagination, right? Like, I was sitting there hoping for more than 200 Facebook followers or something. And so to experience anything that was even more than 4 digits was like, what's going on,
Yeah.
And so that was a really good kind of pivotal moment for us as a team, because up until that point, it was really a 2 to 10 hours a week project. And then uploading that first devlog and seeing, oh, people seem to resonate with this. Let's pursue this a little further. And so at that point, I had determined that regardless of how well any of my videos performed, I would get to devlog number 20 and reevaluate. So I figured I'd be stubborn with myself. Even if I was seeing a dip or bad performance, I wanted to give it a fair shake, because that's usually what successful YouTube channels tell you is consistency, stick with it. And that first one had such a good response from those who did see it. I was like, I think we have relatively decent content on this channel.
Yeah.
Let's pursue this further. And so I determined I would do a devlog every other week, and I held myself to that all the way up until recently, when we've been having to pivot some of our content to be more strategic to the market to try to just get better views, which ironically doesn't always work. Sometimes the devlog's just the best way to go anyway. But it's been one of those things that has now turned into just part of our dev process, where I know I have a certain amount of hours in the week that I'm going to allocate to Tethergeist, and I have a certain amount of hours in the week that I'm going to allocate to video editing. And it's, I think, a critical piece of any video game, at least as young as ours is, because we haven't proven to the world yet that we've finished one.
Yes, right.
We need to go through that process of building it. But it's been a really good motivator on all aspects, right? It's been motivating to see the positive response from comments, and then it's good to hold yourself accountable to something that's public facing, so that you don't get into a rut for too long and you don't produce anything because you don't have anybody holding you accountable. Well, now we have viewers and stuff holding us accountable.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Anyway.
So being, the analytical, data-driven guy that you are, have you noticed any interesting trends or data points regarding the kinds of videos or thumbnails that you create? Have you, like you said, you tried to stray towards things away from devlogs to try and garner more views, but that doesn't always work. Like, do you take like a data-driven approach to YouTube, or is it more like just trying to disseminate information and where you're at with the development of the game?
It's a bit of both, frankly. Yeah. We want to have, so the devlog is like a consistent video that is continually engaging with our audience in good faith, where I don't really care if the devlog underperforms, because I'm more interested in having a transparent communication with our community. So I've categorized videos as such, right? There are some videos where the performance is not important to me. It's all about just the integrity of being an indie game channel that people are following. And then there's another category of videos where we do a lot of kind of research into it. And YouTube, I mean, you're aware, YouTube provides all sorts of tools where there's research tabs and recommendations for what's trending right now and that sort of thing. And so we'll look for topics that we feel like we can speak to from a degree of expertise. that is also trending. So one of the videos that did well was well enough as pixel art. Why is pixel art still used?
Oh yeah.
And it's something that we've seen on a few occasions from other channels, people exploring that question, why is pixel art not going away? And we'll find a couple videos that get like millions of views on a channel with less subscribers than us, and we'll think, oh, maybe that could be us. Maybe this could be our million view video, you know?
Yep.
And so I'll pick that topic accordingly. And then from there, though, I don't really do a whole lot of... I don't put a lot of weight on marketability of content as much as integrity of it. So with this pixel art video, I picked the topic, and then from there I'm like, oh, I don't care what necessarily is trending within the videos. I want to give an actual genuine answer to this question. Why is it being used? And I'll go do the research the way I see it, and I'll provide my insights that way. And I found that that's kind of the best way to approach it anyway. I mean, people can tell if you're being disingenuous, and that's kind of been our approach to those. So it's all kind of organized, right? We've got the devlog, we've got video essays, and video essays are the ones that are like the biggest radical swing of some do terrible, some do incredible. It just depends. We run the thumbnail tests. We try to do everything we can to make something that's legit bait, like Veritasium says.
Yep.
Where it's not so clickbaity that it's just like cringeworthy, but at the same time it piques interest, it piques curiosity.
Right.
So that's kind of been our approach, and it's working well enough, right? It's a slow burn.
Yep, definitely.
We'll take it either way.
Do you know if the majority of your YouTube subscribers are game developers, or do you know the demographic? Is it people who... Because I find this issue a lot with a lot of game developer YouTube channels where they gain a following of more game developers, but they aren't necessarily interested in buying the game that the developers are creating.
Yeah. I have that number, actually.
Oh, really?
At least as far as this, it's a sample size of a survey I sent out, so it's not
nice.
Perfectly indicative, but it's pretty big amount of people. Because I mean, when you've got an audience of 13,000 subscribers, if you send out a poll, you'll get a couple hundred to 1,000 answers. Thomas Brush does that all the time. And granted, it's only the types of people that are... I'm not going to try to look this up. I can't find it. But
yeah, no worries.
It's not always the type of people that wouldn't engage, right? You're only getting a sample of people who are scrolling through and commenting. But
right.
To answer the question at hand, I want to say it was over 2/3, if not more, of our viewers said yes, they are game devs. And you're right. You run into that issue where it's, well, they're just trying to kind of get a feel for what you're experiencing, and they're not really interested in buying your game. I've learned, though, that that's not necessarily true. Game devs are gamers, too, turns out. And
Checks
they
out.
do buy your game.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, our Kickstarter is modest, but we do have over 300 people who've backed the project, and I would bet you many, if not a high majority of them, are developers themselves.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting, right? Because you want to reach out to the audience that is millions and millions of people who are not developers.
Right.
But I think that finding success within our circle is nothing to scoff at, and it's nothing to be embarrassed about, because we all get it. And that's honestly kind of the kindling that's eventually going to spark bigger fires anyway for success. So
totally.
I've accepted that. I'm okay with most of our viewers being developers, you know? And the video essays are trying to reach out of that audience, right? Like the pixel art question is, a lot of people have that question. You don't have to be a developer to necessarily be curious about it. So
totally.
Yeah,
that's interesting. So I want to dive into your kind of holistic approach to game development, because you and I are approaching game dev very differently. And I was thinking through this and I was like, oh, actually, we're kind of exact opposites in a lot of ways. You currently have a full-time job as a UX designer. I quit my full-time job and I'm making my own games full-time and doing YouTube and stuff. You are working in a team and I'm working solo. You are building like your dream game and I'm intentionally making like very small scoped games. So how's this process been for you? And would you recommend people to follow in your footsteps?
Well, I think that we have more in common than you think. So yes, I am pursuing a dream game, and it is like A lot of developers say don't put all your eggs in one basket. And I like to believe that I haven't. So that said, I haven't made money on any of the other games I built. But I've made like 8 or 9 games. And that's how I started, right? So usually my recommendation is to make a lot of small games as a learning experience, participate in game jams and get stuff out there. As far as recommending if people follow my footsteps, if you want to make money as an indie dev, I'm not the right person to ask because I haven't made a lot yet.
Yeah. Yeah. I also feel that way.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
But well, you've probably made more than I have if you have a better strategy. Because I think making smaller games is probably the right way to go. So ironically, I'm not listening to my own words. But that's because we've seen a substantial amount of success associated with Tethergeist that has kept us embedded. Sorry, my hands are cold. I'm in Utah and it's a little chilly today. But yeah, I think that we're not a studio that necessarily swears by this idea of putting everything into a singular game. Now, as far as your question goes with the approach to... Well, did I answer that in full? I mean, I want to make sure I don't get too...
Yeah. Keep going.
So, in that regard, yeah, I would say don't follow in my footsteps. Don't just focus on your dream game. However, I would say that there's nothing wrong with having a dream game as part of your offering. Perhaps if you're going full-time, perhaps you're working on 2 games at a time. If you get too burned out on one, work on the other. Because there is something really exciting about putting everything into a singular game and your audience getting that way as well. Our Discord server has like 1,100 people in it, and they are all in on Tethergeist. And it's a really fun and exciting culture that you wouldn't get with a smaller game necessarily.
Yeah.
So in that regard, from a creative standpoint and from a I don't know, creator's standpoint, there's something really exciting about just having that. But then there's nothing wrong with pursuing multiple games at a time. And so releasing smaller games is a really tried and true method to not destroy your career, because you ship stuff so quickly that you're able to know if it's going to be a financial success or not. Like, I'm still at that point with Tethergeist that I don't know if it's going to be financially successful enough for me to ever quit my full-time job. It could be. You know, we've had people like Noel play it and say it's fantastic. We've had people from Big Mode come play it and think it's fantastic. But at the end of the day, when we go to launch in March, like whether or not people actually pull money out of their wallet and give it to us, we don't know. Right. We're flying dark with that, save for our modest success on Kickstarter. So, anyway, we know from play tests the game is good. We don't know from market tests if it's going to make a lot of money or not. With that whole mindset, then, to quote follow in my footsteps, if you want to pursue game dev the way that I have, then maybe it is a good idea to hold on to a full-time job for a while, because I don't know when Tethergeist is going to make enough money to justify quitting my job. So I'm a risk-averse person. So much to Noah and Ray's chagrin, sometimes I'm not ready to quit my full-time job to go all in on this project. And Kickstarter would have been the opportunity to do that, right? If it had raised enough funds to hold my household together for even 3 to 4 months, I would have been able to justify it. And I'm speaking as if that's not happening. The Kickstarter's still running, so it could very well do some cool stuff.
Yeah, totally.
But I'm a risk-averse person, right? I don't want to. I don't want to put my family in an uncomfortable situation. I have a daughter with special needs. She has spina bifida, which is it's a birth defect that oftentimes causes paralysis from the waist down. She's able to walk, but at the end of the day, we have tons of medical expenses associated with that, and I just can't justify the risk. And so, if I were not supporting so many other people, maybe I'd be more friendly to it. But it's just, I think, a personal preference thing, what you're comfortable doing. So
totally. You say you're flying blind as far as like the success of what Tethergeist and what commercial acclaim it will garner when it launches, which is mostly true, but you do have like your wish list count, which you can kind of see as sort of like a forecast for how many sales you'll get on launch day. You don't have to share, and we can just move on if you don't want to talk about that. But does that give you confidence, or do you feel like you need to continue growing that to where you are more confident with the wishlist count? Or
wish lists are a tricky thing, because if you account for, what is it, 20 to 25% of wish lists, they say, I think that's really high.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe 15 to 20% of wish lists ultimately convert after a year of launch.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't work with the wish list numbers that indies see, right? They tell you that you want to launch with 7,000 to 10,000 wish lists.
Yep.
If you do the math on that, that's not enough. So what the wish lists ultimately get you, particularly with wish list velocity, is you catch the Steam algorithm, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it skyrockets past 20% of your wish lists. And so when I look at the wish lists that we have, we've seen really exciting trends. And the only reason I don't share my wish list publicly yet is I think Thomas Brush said that publishers sometimes don't want you to do that, and it could hurt your potential.
Oh, sure.
To get a deal. I'm more than happy to be transparent about it once I know for sure if we have a publisher or if we're not going to use one.
Yeah.
But I think we're definitely leaning towards looking for one. But at any rate, the wish lists are showing really exciting trends for us, and it could turn into something the Steam algorithm picks up, and it could turn into something that explodes. And totally.
Yeah,
it could be a thing.
Yep.
But with our current wish list count now, if only 20% of them bought the game, I mean, that's not enough to start a studio where I'm supporting a family of 4, including myself. And so it's an interesting question to ask, because as a team we've looked at it and we know that there's that potential for sure. The only reason what am I trying to say? Our wish list numbers are healthy. They're really good. So it's not that we're like scraping the bottom or anything like that. Like it's got a really good trend line. It's got a really good trajectory. Next Fest is running right now. And we're seeing our trend line, just kind of like turn into a really, really steep slope. And so
that's a good graph.
Right? We're excited about that. But it still feels a little blind to me until those wish lists turn into actual sales. That's what makes me feel like we're flying blind. The other thing that is constantly resonating in my mind is my marketing professor's comment about the most powerful forms of marketing. There were 5 that he listed. There's event marketing, right? Like packs. There's asset marketing, like you get from ads in the mail or even ads online and things like that. But the most powerful form of marketing is word of mouth marketing. Studies show time and time again, right? If your friend, that's why they measure NPS, Net Promoter Score. It's how likely are you to recommend this product to your friends? And that's the really fuzzy part of our game that we keep glimpsing bits of, and we think it could be incredibly powerful for us, or it could be nothing. And that's kind of what we're looking at with Tethergeist. Is everybody that plays it, from what we've seen, tells their friends. They're like, "Oh, this game is sweet." But is that actually going to happen when we release it in the wild? Is that going to turn into a big success? That feels a little blind to us.
Totally.
Yeah.
Man. Well, I mean, I can see it happening. I think you guys have a really good quality game, and the fact that you have the demo so that people can get their hands on it, and see what it's actually like to play. I think that from what I see, and I wouldn't be surprised if it absolutely blows up. So hopefully that'll happen.
Appreciate the vote of confidence.
Yep. We'll see. I want to transition into your personal life real quick. Not too personal, I promise.
Sure.
But I'm interested how you juggle your full-time job with developing Tethergeist, apart from that, and also managing a team and being, coordinating all the team dynamics. Like, how do you make that work? Because that's a hard thing to do.
It's very hard. With my full-time job, there comes a certain restlessness at the end of the day for me that turns into developing Tethergeist. And so, and I work from home. remotely. So my day-to-day kind of looks like coming down the stairs. My commute, I always joke, my commute is a 30-second walk down the stairs to my office. And I'll work until 5, and then I've got sacred sacred time set apart for family. 5 to 8 is like, that's family time. And then the kids get to bed, and then I'm in the office again. And the amount of time that I spend on Tethergeist throughout the week fluctuates based on deadlines. So before PAX, I was working until like 2 a.m. for that whole week. Yeah. And then waking up in the morning, and it's not sustainable. It's painful, right? Some of the work hours turn into 80 plus hours if I'm counting every time I spend at my desk being productive for my day job and for development.
Right.
So it's not sustainable. Other days, though, and this is indicative of why Tethergeist is 3 years in the making, I don't get that many hours in. Sometimes it's only 8 to 9, or perhaps I have meetings later in the day and I'm able to sneak in a little extra time in the mornings. And it fluctuates a lot. So depending on what time of year you catch me and what kind of events are coming up, it can be anywhere from 10 to 40 hours on Tethergeist that week.
Yeah.
So that's how that balance kind of works. As far as the team dynamic goes, I'm hardly a leader, because Noah and Ray are very self-sufficient and very motivated and driven. So it's much more of a partnership than just me like leading a team. So I like to say I have that official title, team lead, because it's O in co-games, and ultimately I'm the one who started all this, right? I recruited them into my indie game dev process. But they've really taken their roles, responsibilities, everything within their purview to the next level, to the point where it's a partnership. And part of why it's worked so well for us is because we resonate. So that's something that I wish I could give better advice on how to form a good team, but it's really serendipitous and lucky for us, right? Ray knew my wife growing up, and she worked on that board game with me, right? That's how we knew Ray.
Nice.
And then in GMTK, we had 48 hours. And I'm like, well, there's no way I can do the pixel art in time. Not to mention, I'm not a great pixel artist by any stretch of the imagination. And Ray was like, well, funny enough, Noah, this is what he does. And everything fell into place to the point where we already had synergy from day one.
That's awesome.
Yeah, the team dynamic has always been really productive. And sometimes we butt heads on things. And we all have really strong opinions on things. And so it turns into discussions that are cordial, but sometimes intense. And it ultimately makes for a better process overall.
That's awesome. So it sounds like if the opportunity were availed to you, you would like to pursue developing Tethergeist full time.
Yes.
And hopefully that will manifest for you. Something that I've heard in your devlogs is, as you are trying to balance your full-time job with developing this game at odd hours, you use this term that you need to learn to love the grind. And what did you mean by that?
Yeah, it dials back to the follow-through. The grind is when you sit down to develop the game and you don't want to, and it feels like a grind and it's not fun. You have to love that too. Right? So if that means hitting your head against the desk for 3 hours on a single bug, learn to enjoy that. Like, people like spicy food. I don't know why. And it's uncomfortable. It hurts. But I don't know. Game development, sometimes it's spicy food. You just learn to love it too. But
that's awesome. I love
that's
that.
all I mean by that.
Yeah. That's incredible. I guess my last question is, what are your plans for the future? So you're right in the middle of a Kickstarter right now. Let's say things go well with either the Kickstarter or the launch of Tethergeist. Are you 5-year plan? Are you hoping that you can form like a concrete game studio where you have 4 or 5 employees, or do you like the current team that you're at, or like what are you doing looking forward?
Yeah, it's highly dependent on the success of Tethergeist.
Yeah.
So we've talked about it as a team. Because, Noah is co-owner. We both own the company. And the plans that we have are, path A. Well, maybe this is path C because it's the path I don't like. But the first path is that Tethergeist is a modest success and it's not strong enough for any of us to really justify sticking with it full time. Mm-hmm. At which point, we'll stick with our full-time gigs separately, but O & Co would ideally never go away. So I probably wouldn't learn a new game engine, and it would probably be another pixel game as our second. Mm-hmm. So the plan, no matter which plan it is, Tethergeist will not be our last game, right? Mm-hmm. Like it can't be. We've got so many things that we've learned. There's so much spaghetti code in that game that I wish I had done differently. Like there's tons of stuff that we want to do in a second game. So one potential is that it's not successful enough to justify it, and we continue it as a part-time thing. Mm-hmm. Now, if it is big enough to justify going full-time, this would be like, plan B. Maybe it's not big enough to hire new employees, but it's big enough to have Noah, Ray, and myself all quit our jobs and just do this. That point, it's highly dependent on the creative vision we have for Game 2, and we have a lot more creative leeway if we have that kind of financial backing. So, on our road trip to PAX and throughout a lot of our development process, we've kicked around multiple ideas for what we want Game 2 to be. And we have some really fun ideas that I think could be really, really cool. But some of those ideas need to be built in a different engine because Game Maker it's a 2D engine. So, if we had enough finances, I would go learn Unity or Unreal, depending on which one is going to treat indies better. And Godot is definitely in the discussion as well, to try to build something that operates within the 3D space for our second game. So that's option B, right? And then option C would be, if Tethergeist somehow made millions. Yeah. I might not even need to learn Unreal at that point, right? We'll go hire somebody and pay them, a really good, substantial wage because, hey, we've got the O & Co brand recognition. We have a certain degree of quality that we're going to promise our audience, and we can justify the upfront expense knowing that we should be able to deliver on Game 2. So that's kind of the different paths we see moving forward. The probability of each is one that I don't like to think about too much because I imagine that it goes a certain direction. But the 5-year plan is that we're not going anywhere. We want to establish ourselves as an indie studio that people know is going to deliver a certain caliber of game. And we want Tethergeist to exhibit that, to springboard us into just continually making them. Because, you're doing these podcasts. I'm sure you've heard it 1,000 times that one of the keys to success is keep making games.
Yeah.
The big games are usually not the developer's first game.
Yeah, so exactly. Totally.
Something we're acutely aware of.
Yeah.
But
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Man, that's all the questions that I've got. But is there anything that you wanted to go over before we wrap it up?
No, I don't think so. I want to give you my heartfelt gratitude for having me on your podcast. It's an honor to be here. So.
I've really enjoyed having you on, and I only recently found out about your YouTube channel. I had known about Tethergeist. I had seen it before, but I didn't know about your YouTube channel, and so I've been diving into it over the past few days, and I'm like, oh, this is like really awesome what you guys are doing, both with the game and with the devlogs. So, thanks for coming on the podcast. I like what you guys are doing. I love the stuff that you like. I'm learning stuff from you too, like how you incorporated the Steam analytics using the stat system, which is super interesting and something that I'm going to look into doing. And then also the what was it called, the Google tool for displaying data in what was it called? I forgot what it was called.
Studio.
Yeah, I've never heard of that before, but I'm like, okay, I'm looking into that as well. But
free dashboarding tool. It's real nice.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for coming on to the podcast. I'm gonna leave links in the description below so that people can check out your game Tethergeist, as well as your YouTube channel and your Kickstarter campaign that's live right now. So go check it out. It'd be awesome if we could hit those stretch goals for bringing it onto Xbox and PlayStation. I think that'd be really fun. Is there anything else that you want to plug for where people can follow what you're doing?
You said Steam demo and Kickstarter. Those are the big pillars we've got right now. Yeah.
Awesome.
And then, the YouTube, I mean, we've talked about it many times. YouTube series, if you want to keep in contact with us. And our Discord server, you can talk to me directly there. I mean, we're still so small.
Yeah. That's awesome.
I'll almost always respond if you ping me. So
cool. Sounds good. Cool. Well, thanks again. This conversation was a lot of fun. We should do it again sometime.
Hey, sweet. Yeah, I'm always game.
Cool. All right. See ya.